All right. Welcome everyone. As it is 3 o'clock, I would like to start with this information session of the SoTL subsidy round of 2025. Before we start with the session, I would like to note that this session will be recorded and temporarily published on the NKO website. So if you want to stay anonymous, please turn off your camera and your microphone. As it is 3 o'clock, I will start with an overview of the program of this session today. And we'll start with an introduction of the meeting. Then we'll have an explanation of SoTL. We'll also have an explanation of the procedure. We'll dive into some points to consider when you're writing an application. And we'll provide a summary of key points for submitting a SoTL application. And at the end, we have some time for questions. I do want to note that the second part, the explanation of SoTL, will be a bit more interactive. So if you have very specific SoTL related questions, it can be discussed maybe in this part of the presentation. And otherwise, you can send them in the chat. My colleague will monitor the chat as well for questions. If they're small, they can perhaps be answered via chat as well. And otherwise, we will have some time at the end of this information session to dive a bit deeper into these questions. So to start off, an introduction of this meeting. Who is presenting today? My name is Nadine Dreuver from NKO. I have two colleagues with me today, Rob Evertse and Wouter Keizer. Rob will present about the procedure of this subsidy round, and Wouter will monitor the chats. And we also have some SoTL experts with us today. We're very happy that they're joining us. It's Femke Kirchner from the Utrecht University and also Frouine den Oudendammer from Leiden University of Applied Sciences. The aim for today is to provide you all with an overview of the SoTL rounds, but please also read the call for proposals. There's a lot of information in there as well, and a lot more details on the conditions and an explanation of the full procedure. So please check this document as well. The target audience for today is people who are considering SoTL application, people who are exploring what SoTL is and whether their idea is suitable for SoTL. Also for applicants who are seeking an overview of the procedure, and people who are looking for guidance on writing a SoTL application. And before we'll dive into the SoTL component of today, I will also give some background information of this subsidy round. So it is the SoTL round 2025, and it falls under the responsibility of the Program Committee for Higher Education. It's part of the innovation program of higher education, which also means that there's a restriction for main applicants. So you can only be a main applicant for one of these rounds. So this applies to this SoTL grant 2025, the Scale Grant 2025, and the Comenius program of 2026. So either teaching fellows, senior fellows, or leadership fellows. So you can only be a main applicant for one of these rounds. For this SoTL grant, the total budget is 1,865,000. Per project, you have a minimum of 30,000 and a maximum of 35,000. The duration of a project should be a minimum of 12 months and a maximum of 24 months. Please consider this as well when you're writing your application, what the scope of your project can be. An important deadline for this subsidy round is the deadline for submitting an application, which is the 3rd of March 2026, and this is before 2 in the afternoon. And please start on time. You can log into the system as well, and just check if everything is working, because the deadline is very strict. If it's 1 second after the deadline, the system will not allow you to submit your application. So yeah, please start on time with this. With this background information, I think it will be good to dive into SoTL a bit further. And then I would like to give the word to Femke and or Froine for their parts.
Okay, hi, I'm Femke Kiersner. I'm an educational consultant at Onderwijs, Advies en Training at Utrecht University. And in my daily work, I work with teachers to improve their teaching and learning. And that's very convenient in a SoTL context, because it means that I help them to set up, start and execute SoTL projects. I'm here with Froine.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Froine from Leiden University of Applied Science, and I am one of the coordinators of our Center for Teaching and Learning. And one of our programs we have within that center is our SoTL program, which we started 5 years ago, and where teachers do their own practice-based research to their own education.
Yes, thank you. So, and today, now, Froine and me will explain what SoTL is and what this means for your application. That's the main goal. So, what is SoTL? Well, SoTL is something teachers do, focused on student learning in a systematic and evidence-informed way with the explicit goal of improving teaching and sharing the results. So, it's in these icons. It's for teachers, it's student learning, evidence-informed, improved teaching and sharing the results. And another way to give you an explanation of SoTL or a formulation is an approach in which teachers systematically study student learning in their own teaching context to improve their teaching in evidence-informed ways and sharing the results. And Felden captures this idea in 5 guiding principles. And it's not a checklist, but together they give a clear picture of what SoTL is about. So first of all, it's focused on student learning. So it always starts with questions about student learning, what students understand, what they experience, what they struggle with, and that's different from when starting from what we do as teachers. Of course, they are related to each other, but the starting point is student learning. And then we can see what we can do as teachers, but that's not the starting point. Then it's grounded in context, and that's in 2 ways. So the first way is that it's situated within your own teaching context, your course, your students, your constraints. And this context is not a weakness, it's a strength, and I'll get to that later. But it's very central to SoTL, this local context. And the second way it's grounded in context is that it's situated within relevant theory and literature, educational theory and literature. So it's a scholarly context. And this is also where the evidence-informed part comes in. Then the third one, it should be methodologically sound. And this means that it's an inquiry and that it's systematic and well thought through. And it doesn't mean that it has to be complex or that it's experimental, but it means that the method should fit the question that you would like to answer. So then the fourth, it should be conducted in partnership with students. And then we don't mean that you collect the data from students, because of course you're going to be collecting data from students, but it says here partnership with students. And what we then mean is that students can be partners as well. Yeah, so they can help you frame questions, give feedback, or interpret the findings. So see students as partners. Then the fifth one, the last one, is going appropriately public, which means that whatever you find out or come to know is shared. Your SoTL project is shared. You can write an article, you can give a presentation, you can write a report or a blog. It doesn't matter as long as others learn from your work, which is very important for SoTL. And as you can see on the slide, I have these small post-its, and they're a reminder of the key takeaway of the slides. And here it says that a SoTL grant, and it's related to the SoTL grant. So what should you take with you for writing the application? Well, SoTL grants are meant to support projects that align with these principles, with these 5 principles. So make sure that they are. So, and these, to place these principles in a little bit more broad perspective, it helps to see SoTL as one of several ways teachers can engage with their learning. And know it says reflective teaching, scholarly teaching, SoTL, and know that these are not categories of good versus bad teaching. They're different ways of engaging with teaching, and they're all valuable. Yeah, so you have reflective teaching, and most teachers, me, you, are already reflective teachers, because you notice what works, you respond to feedback, you adapt your teaching based on your experience, and this is called reflective teaching, and it's essential, but it remains quite private and informal. If you learn from experience, but you take this a step further and draw on existing research and theory about teaching and learning, then you're scholarly teaching. Yeah, in this case, evidence informs practice, but the main goal is still improving your own teaching. And then the next step is SoTL, and SoTL adds to learning from experience, and evidence-informed practice adds two crucial elements. And that is a systematic inquiry, that it should be methodologically sound, like Felton says, and making the work public. And with that, SoTL is not just about improving your teaching, but about contributing to shared knowledge about student learning. And the takeaway here is that if you're curious about your teaching and want to investigate it in a systematical way and share what you learned, then SoTL would be a good fit. And the SoTL grant is especially intended to support projects in this third category. And this inquiry and having to think of methodologies makes it very close to research. So in the next step, I want to show you where it overlaps and differs from educational research as a discipline. In this table that you see here, you see some differences between educational research as a discipline and SoTL. And I'm only showing you this so that you realize that you don't have to do educational research, that there's a difference. And what you see is a continuum. They're the extremes to help you clarify where a project starts and what it aims to do. So educational research is often driven by a goal of theory building, developing or testing theoretical explanations of learning, and SoTL is primarily driven by the goal of improving teaching and learning in a concrete educational setting. Both are valuable. I'm not talking about that, but they answer different kinds of what are we doing questions. Educational research typically aims to produce knowledge that is generalizable across contexts, while SoTL aims to produce knowledge that is meaningful within a specific context and useful for others who work in similar contexts. So it's not the aim to have to make universal claims. Educational research often starts from disciplinary or theoretical questions, while SoTL starts from questions teachers you have about your own teaching and student learning, like I said on the first slide on what is SoTL. So the takeaway is that the SoTL grant is intended to support SoTL projects and not educational research projects framed within a teaching context. So make sure you're writing a SoTL project.
Well, and that sounds really logical, but then the hard part comes in, because how do you do that? Well, as Femke already mentioned, SoTL is always about your teaching, about what you see happening in your students' learning. So a SoTL project always starts in your own teaching practice. And to do that rightly, you can ask yourself a few questions. And well, we wanted to do a little exercise with you to help you to ask yourself these questions. And I use for that the templates which you see there in the on the side, and I will put it in a link to the template in the chat after what I told you, so you can use it. You don't have to, but you can use that one, because you have to ask yourself some questions, and often it begins your question begins just with an idea, something you see happening, something you notice and you're questioning, or you are curious about what's going on here. So it always starts with your own observations about what's happening with your students in your class. And sometimes that issue is really clear, and sometimes it's more like an idea you have or a feeling. But that's not enough, as Femke said. Just a feeling like, oh, there's something wrong. It's not enough for a sort of project. So the first question is, what is the question, the problem you have? What do you see? Why is it a problem? So think for yourself, what is it about you want to know more of? So that's the first question, and you can also fill it in for yourself or write it down. So then after this exercises, you have your main questions already answered, maybe. So that's the first question you have to answer. For example, well, you see, for example, why do so many students struggle with this course? Or we give lots of feedback, but students don't seem to use it. What's going on? Or we're introducing a new educational concept. We're going to do that, but can we try it out? Maybe how it works. So those are questions you can start with. And then we can go to the next question. And that's who are involved in it. And also for who is it a problem? Sometimes we see people who say, well, we have a problem as a teacher, but you are really looking for what's the problem or the issue for the students. So it's interesting to look at, well, what's going on there for the students? What's their concern? And then you want to know, which students are we talking about? Is it a specific group? Is it 1 year of students, or is it in a specific course, or is it another? Well, can you make it really concrete what type of students you're talking about? Or maybe you think, well, I see that my colleagues are doing something. It's really, we are all giving different types of feedback. That's not correct. But then you have to ask yourself, for who is that a problem? So always try to ask yourself, where is the students coming in this situation? Then we can go to the next question. So try to fill in this for yourself. For who is this a problem? And also who have to benefit from your research? And why is it a problem? And why is it now a problem? Is it only your problem as a teacher? And maybe your students think, well, for me, there's no problem at all. So that's really good to know. Why is it? Why really do you want to know more about this situation? Yeah, we can do the next one. And well, this has a little bit to do. Where does this problem take place? About for who is it a problem? Does this problem take place in one course? Or is it in a specific situation within a class situation? Has it something to do with specific behavior you see with your students? So make it really, really specific. Where is this going on? Where does this take place? Where your question is about. Next one. Well, and when is also the same question. When does this, is it always, or a specific situation? Is it in 1 year? Is it during the year? Is it at the end of the year? Is it in February when people are making their decision? Do I want to continue or maybe stop with this study I've chosen? So this also, all those context situations really are important to give context to your question. Yeah, you can go to the next one. And then the last one, it's in the right down in the right, the big one, the big question is, how did problem arise? Do you have any thoughts about that? Sometimes we see that teachers, for example, they see students are not coming to my class. They're not motivated. That's the problem. I'm going to motivate them. But is that really the problem? And how did that problem then arise? So you have always to ask yourself next questions. And also within this question, it's really important to ask yourself, what did we do already for this this problem, to solve this problem? That was the word I was looking for. What did we already do? What did we try? What happened? And also really important, am I the only one who is seeing this? Or are my colleagues seeing the same? Or is our data of our students well-being, seeing the same patterns as what I am noticing? So all those questions you have to ask yourself. Well, I'm really curious. Maybe you can give us some comments in the chat to have some interaction, because I'm curious. Is there something you say, well, one of the questions I really can't answer. It's for me really hard to answer. And maybe you can let us know that. Which question do you think is really difficult to give answer on? I'll give you some time. Or maybe there's something you say, well, that's really clear for us. And maybe it's really easy. You already filled this in. That's also possible. Well, we can go to the next slide. But if you think, well, I have some questions about this, I would like to ask. Well, after this step, you have some more information about the context you're looking at, about the problem you are looking at. But then you have to make a question of it. But there is something. I'm reading the chat now because there's something here. The where problem is difficult for me because the problem I'm dealing with is AI and how to prepare students to use it in their professional lives. But their AI use is private, so I don't see it necessarily. So yeah, that's a good point. You see it everywhere or not, you don't know. Yeah, but the thing is, you can mention, for example, in my class, within this subject I'm teaching, there I have a problem that when I ask people to make a plan or something, I don't know if it's their own plan or if it is generated by AI. I want to know if this is a problem for the learning of my students, for example. So then you can make it more specific. So it's not about that you know exactly where it happens, but for your research, you need to make it specific what you're looking at. There are quite a lot of questions and we have only 2 pages. How to deal with that? Yeah, that's a good question. So that's we come to that point. How much do you have to write down and what do you already know? The thing is that you have to ask yourself questions about what do I really, really want to know more of and what I'm looking at. And these questions can help to make things more smaller and more concrete, because it's not such a big research you're going to do. So you have to really, how do you say that? Put it into a box. Yeah. In the omdenken literature, problem is different between expectation and facts. Well, that could be. It could be that there is a problem out expectation of teaching. That's also really interesting to know what's going on there. And you can also involve students in that. So it's always nice to have a little bit of a twist in your mind when you are looking at a problem, to look from another perspective. And how did the problem arise? Often that's what you want to investigate, I think. Yeah, very good. Very good. We can go to the next slide, because that's exactly, Veronique, the thing. That's really an important question to ask yourself. Because when you're looking at different kind of subtle questions, you can look on. Well, we make a difference in three types of questions. The first one is when you want to find a solution-oriented question. For example, you see students struggling to read academic literature critically, and now with AI, they sometimes don't read at all. And then you can ask yourself, how can we use AI in a way that actually supports that critical learning? For example, you're trying to find a solution, or, well, we have less contact time, but we still need students to learn to work safely in a lab. How can students learn independently and still demonstrate safe lab skills? So then you have a problem and you're trying to find a solution that fits that problem. Another way of questioning is that you want to get more insight in what's happening with students. You really try to understand, okay, what's going on here with these students? And sometimes you have already some ideas about that, but it doesn't always have to be the right idea. So, for example, the question I saw here with a few of my teachers, they had a problem that second-year nursing students did not attend skills training sessions, and they asked themselves, why don't they do that? What can we do to change that? Or what kind of guidance do students need when they can choose how to achieve and demonstrate the learning outcomes in a very flexible way? What's going on there? What do they need, the students? How do they make decisions? Or how do students experience freedom of choice in their study program? And what does that do with your sense of belonging when everyone has their own study program? We want to know what's going on there. So that's an insight question. And the third one is a question where you want to know more about what the effect is of something you did. For example, you want to know if something what you did, if that really works, if it really helps for students. For example, that was one, a colleague of mine, she had a SoTL grant last time, and she did a really interesting research because she wanted to know, and I just cite her, to what extent can an authentically designed digital game-based learning intervention improve academic reading skills of law students? So she noticed, well, they need to become better readers in English. How can we improve that? She already saw some, she had literature that gamers are better readers in English than non-gamers. So she thought, well, let's design a game where they become better readers in English. And that's what she designed, and she tested it, and it works. So that's then she wanted to know more about, does this work? Well, and that was the thing she wanted to investigate. Another one is also, it's on the SoTL site actually. To what extent does a Dungeons and Dragons based game enhanced self-regulated learning and motivation among first-year physics teachers, education students? So they wanted to know, if we build a Dungeons and Dragons based game, will they become better teachers in physics? Because they wanted to challenge them on another way than they did. Well, that's something you really want to know. We designed something, we renewed something, we want to know if there is an effect. So now I would like to know what kind of, I will do this now. sometimes you have to ask these questions. Well, not all at a time, but sometimes it starts. You think, I want to know what the effect is, but then you find out, well, I first need to know more about what's going on. For example, the nursing students in our group, they said, well, they're not motivated to come to our classes. We want to motivate them more. But then someone asked, how do you know that they're not motivated? And they said, that's a good question. So they first needed to have some more insights. What's going on here? They asked students in a survey, are you motivated? But then they did it, of course, in a different way. And what appeared, they are motivated to become a nurse, but they didn't understand why they had to come to that classes, that time, all the time, because they didn't learn what they expected. So then the situation changed. They knew more about what we really have to find a solution for. It's not that they're not motivated for the study. They need something else that we thought they needed. And then you can change it. So I'm curious, what kind of question do you have? Can you put that in the chat?
We have one interesting question asking
good.
the difference between a solution and effects, because it both has to do with offering a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
So what's the difference there?
That's a good question. I find it always very difficult too, but maybe Femke can help me out if I don't tell the correct story. But in an effect, you already know that it is a solution for you already tested in a small group. For example, you find a new design for something like a game. You did it already. You had already done some other research, and then you want to know if this situation, this intervention has the effect I want to know. In a solution, you are looking more like, okay, this is the problem. What types of solution would be a right fit for this problem? So it's more like looking for the right solution instead of, does this solution really have the effect that I want to see? Most of the time, you do them both. But you need to ask yourself that question. Femke, do I have a good explanation?
So you have the solution, you have the insight and the effects. And the effects we also... Sometimes we put behind that the word exploration of an innovation. So for a solution, there has to be a problem underneath. So often you have a problem and you want to solve it, and you think of a way to solve it, and then you want to test it. That's the solution type of question. But it could also be that there's just something interesting that you want to investigate. So it's not that you have a problem. That's not the case. It's just that your colleague is doing something that you think is interesting, or there's something new on the market and you think that's interesting, and you say, okay, AI, for instance, that maybe there's no problem for you using AI, but you just want to see how it can optimize your teaching and your education. So then you say, okay, I have a certain teaching intervention. There's no problem, but I have this teaching intervention, and I'd like to know what are the effects of this teaching intervention. So I think that's the primary difference between, on the one hand, this solution, and on the other hand, the effects.
Yeah, and there's another real good comment. It says, it seems like a sort of proposal is based on a problem, but it's also possible to start a proposal from an opportunity for education. To give more context, well, we changed to give more context. I want to research a type of education that works exceptionally well, but can be better evidence informed and thereby further spread through higher education. Yes, so you want to know the effect. That's an example of something you did something, you already implemented it, you think it's a really good idea and more people need to know it, and then you're going to find out what is the effect. So then it's you know what's really going on there with the students, and if you're really doing the things you or change the things you really wanted to do. So that's also really, really good, really possible way of doing sort of research. So it doesn't always have to do with a problem, but you started this new intervention on a reason, I think, because you wanted to do something, you try to do something. So it's not really a problem like, oh, there's something going wrong. It's more a question. So you can also say it's more like a question you have or something you're curious about. And I call that a problem, but of course, it's not always a problem in a way like there's something going wrong. Okay.
And there's also a question I see about whether it's whether you go from a student problem or a teacher problem. And I think what was mentioned in the slide before, it's not about the problem, it's about student learning. That's the main focus. So it could be that you have a problem as a teacher, but the focus is on student learning. Students, the learning process of the students or the students' outcomes in learning are not what you want them to be. And that's the main focus.
Exactly.
So it could be, you could consider, you could see that, or you could diagnose that as a teacher, of course, or maybe the students themselves bring it to light. But it's the focus on student learning in both ways, in both instances. Yeah.
But it starts most of the time with something you see, like they're not attending. Why not? I think it's a problem. But then you have to focus on, and why? What does that do with the learning of the students? So you always come to the learning process. I'm curious if there are some other ideas of what type of questioning you would put in your abstract.
Yeah, so here's another question. If we don't know what the solution is, can a SoTL project try to uncover what this solution is, or does it need to have an idea of the solution already at the proposal? At the proposal stage, well, in the proposal, I think you have to know whether you're going for a solution problem or an insight problem. If you don't know the solution yet, that's very well possible, then you cannot test it as well. So you're not in the solution question. Then you're going to be formulating an insight question. But later on, I'm going to show you that with writing the application, you're actually starting your SoTL project. So you first, before you hand in the application, you have to know whether there's a solution for your problem or not. And if there's not, then you're going to go for an insight question. If there is, then you can, in the SoTL project, you can implement it and then test whether it works.
Yeah. I'm curious why the nursing students were not attending the skills classes. What were the outcomes of study? Oh, it was a long time ago, but I still find it a really interesting thing because I'm also a bit well. What the thing is I have to try to remember it correctly. Is that they were really interested and really motivated to become a nurse, but they didn't always knew well, had the right experiences in the classes they attended, because sometimes they came to the class and they thought, now I'm going to do some skills, and then they only got some explanations. And they thought, well, I could read this somewhere. I just wanted to do something. So that also has to do with your, well, what you expected to receive. And they were also a bit critical about the teachers. So this research was also something for the group of teachers, like, oh, we have to look at ourselves. So and they also found out in this questionnaire that there was a difference between boys and girls, or women and men, and that's something also they want to continue. So they did some interventions, and it also had to do with autonomy of the to improve more, well, the autonomy of the students. So when they come to class, they could say, well, I need to practice this, and someone else wanted to practice something else, and then that was more possible in the other classes they changed. So there it started with ask the students. Sometimes that's really easy, and that's well, that's another question, and then we can go to the other slide. Does the question have to be a student problem? Can also be a real world problem for which you design a novel type of education, for instance, to support students or future professional resilience, of which you want to. So you want to design something, but then still you have to know, what do we want to learn them? What do they have to learn? And how can we learn it to them? So then there is still, you're looking for a solution. I think so. So it's not really a problem. It's something you want to design something new because they need to learn more new skills. That's what I understand from the question.
Yeah, I don't think
So-
there has to be a student problem. If there's not a student problem, you're more in the effects types of questions. And yeah, and you can then decide if you want to design something and see what the effect is, or that you want to see whether you need some insight. Because it could also very well be that something is going very well. Yeah, that's for the insight question. Something is going very well and you want to know why, so that you
Why?
can
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
different educational settings.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to the other slide. From questions to answers. Because when you know what you want to know more about, you have your questions really well written down, then you need to know, well, how can I get the answers? And there are many different ways. So we cannot tell you what to do. But in here, we just want to give you a real short overview. So if you can click. So you always start with the question, what's already known about this situation, about the question I have. And the thing is, there is a lot of information already. There's already a lot of research done to how students learn, what works, what not. So it's really important to start with literature. So to find out what's already known about this, what can I use, what is maybe there are already some interesting interventions you find in literature. So that's your first starting point. It's always to start by what's already known. Then the other one. The other question is about what data do you need? It sounds really logical, of course. You need data that can answer your questions. But sometimes we see that you want to understand how students think about it, but you're looking to the results of their tests, for example. That doesn't fit. So you really have to know what you really need to know, and how can you find it. I will give some answers, some examples later on. Where and how do I find it? And the other one, and who to involve. And now you can click again. Yeah. So you always start with your literature. That's what I said. When you use data, it's always really important to have a look at what data already exists. What can I use? For example, you can use test results or products of students. You can have a look at what's going on here. You can use learning analytics in your LMS, maybe, if that's available. There are already surveys done most of the time in your institution, like in the 100 days study, or the student survey. It's done nationally. That can give you already some information, maybe also to get more information about the context you're talking about, or about finding out what's really going on. Most of institutions also have an institutional research department where they have information about students who are starting and who are quitting, and who are those students, where do they come from. So there is already a lot of data you can use sometimes. The other way is that you ask and observe. And you can ask students what they do or not do, or how they think about things. And you can use survey. You can make your own. That's sometimes quite difficult to make a good survey, but you can also use validated surveys that already exist for some topics, like for motivation, for example, or well, I don't know, maybe we can name some later on, but you can also do interviews. So really ask them and speak to them, and you can also do it in a group interview, or in a focus group. You can also do observations. when you want to know more about interaction or about behavior. That takes more time, of course, but well, that's also a possibility. And it's really important that you involve others. So when you want to collect data, and you want to collect data maybe from more than your own class or the students you see, maybe you need some colleagues to also involve to collect some data for you. Or maybe you can participate with students to do that together. And you can also involve students beforehand to have a brainstorm with them. Well, I think this is something's going on. How do you look at that? If you want to know more, think with me. How can we collect the data about that? So it's really important that when you do a SoTL study, it's you do that for yourself, and you do that on your own, but you're not doing that alone. Always involve your colleagues in it and students, because it helps also when to maybe, if you want that, maybe to change something or to implement something you want to do later. So these are some really quite logical tips for you. And there's a lot of things. Maybe you read it already in the chat. There are some questions. It's also about.
I think we could take a look at Afke's question on this slide. Do you mean that this is while you're doing your research, or do you need to incorporate this in the application?
Well, it depends on. Sometimes you have to know more, like looking already in the literature. You already need to read some literature well, in your application, you need to use literature for that, because we want to know, or not we, but we as a whole, we would like to know, is it something only in your situation occurs, or did you already know what possible ways you can look at this? So that's something you have to do, but all the other things are more things you do when you doing your research. But have a brainstorm with your colleagues and your students. It's something really smart to do already before you do your application. So it depends on what the questions are you want to solve there. So
we can save these other questions for later.
Shall we save that one? Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Okay, then we can go to my last slides. Yeah. What to do with the results? Well, Femke already mentioned that it's really important to share. And it's really important to share with the ones who can also benefit from what you found out. So you always have to be in the first exercise we did with the 4 times why and 1 how. There was also who could benefit. And it can be your colleagues in your own department, but maybe you're the colleagues of another institution. So it's really important to have already a bit of an idea about who are the others who could benefit from what I'm finding out. And how can I reach them? And how does that look like? And we are all familiar with writing an article or giving a poster presentation. And that's okay. You also should do that. It's really good. But I think you can look more further, because if you want to really have impact or you want to change something, then it's most of the time not enough. So you can also think about, well, maybe I write a handout or make a toolbox or a leaflet or a video or a lesson plan or a workshop. And you always have to write down how you came to that. But that's something you can use, and you can use in the education. And then most of the time, the impact you have with your research is bigger if you not only write an article, because when someone writes an article, someone reads it, and then not always there is the change maybe you needed. So it's really important. I just want to give you the creativity to look at the way of sharing in another way than maybe the the things we're always thinking of. What's also really important, I would like to mention here, is when you want to do something in your own department, then it's really important that you not only share it, what you found out at the end of your project, but share already during the project. Because it really helps if your colleagues know what you're doing, and if the questions you're answering is also their question, they know they can think with you, and they also when something's coming out of your research, like, well, we should give another way of feedback, then they're more willing to change something because they already know that you were the one who was doing research to that. So involve others and think of your audience who would maybe who could also benefit from your research. That was yeah. Can we do a question again, or? Oh, yeah, that's what I said. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So after this, our tips for you, we have a little SoTL check for you, because well, you have to ask yourself when you heard what Femke told you and what I tried to learn you here is about, is your main question about student learning, is the inquiry grounded in your own teaching context? Will you investigate in a systematic and evidence-informed way? Are students involved beyond being just data? And do you intend to share what you learn with others? So I'm really curious, who thinks after this, what you heard here, like, yeah, I can check all the 5 boxes. And if you think I can check all the 5 boxes, please put a smiley in the chat, because then we are all very happy.
If you can't, then...
If you can't, name the number you think, this is my struggle.
See thumbs up.
I see some thumbs up. That's also good. The 4th seems to be the challenging. Yeah, I understand it. 4th. Yeah.
Everybody said challenging. So at Utrecht University, we do quite a lot of SoTL projects, but only few are really in partnership with students. We did a course in which was really nice at the pharmaceutical sciences. There was a study done where pharmaceutical students were involved in doing SoTL projects with teachers, and they were real partners there, which was a really, really nice study. But otherwise, it's already quite hard to check all 5 boxes for a teacher, and to include students as well is really an additional hurdle or difficulty. And I think what is meant here is that you think about it and make informed choices, and not just see students as the ones who you get data from, but to talk to the students. I think that's a really important takeaway message from the 4th principle.
Yeah. I think the other questions, they will answered after this block, I think. Yeah, okay, perfect. So this was it for now. We wanted to learn more about what are we talking about when we do a SoTL research, and it has many types of doing research, and be creative also. That's what I want to give a tip to you. And now we go to the formal procedures, the funny part of it.
Yes, and I will take over. So in this section, we will discuss the procedure in rather general terms. For more specific information about the procedure, we would like to refer you to the call for proposals in chapter 3 and chapter 4. And there's also an FAQ on the website. But the following will be discussed. We will start with some general information, some information about submitting your application, the assessment aspects, then us checking for admissibility, and checking the personal interests, and then the peer review part. So the writing of the peer reviews and the checking of the peer reviews. And we will end with a general overview of the timeline. Next slide, please. Yeah. So let's start with some general information. The procedure for this round of SoTL is different from the previous SoTL round because the previous SoTL round worked with an assessment committee and this round works with peer reviews. And this is a new procedure for SoTL, but it's not an entirely new procedure because it's the same procedure that is being used by NWO for the Open Competition XS. So that goes for humanities and natural sciences, I believe. So if you happen to know anyone who has applied for these rounds, and if you know them, you can ask them for their experience and some information in advance. A consequence of this procedure is that all applicants are also assessors. So that means that all applicants collectively are responsible for the procedure. So that means that if you do not make your deadlines, the whole procedure runs stuck. So it's important to participate and keep this in mind. It also means that if you fail to meet a deadline, your application will be pulled from the procedure and will not be processed further. Of course, it can always happen that personal situations come into play and you get sick or anything. And it's possible to discuss this with us in advance, but if you do not meet the deadline without notifying us, your application will be put. Next slide, please. So why did we choose for this procedure? Well, that mostly has to do with the procedure fitting the goal of SoTL. SoTL is a low threshold, a quick procedure, and we would like to combine that with a low threshold, quick procedure. The whole procedure is anonymous, so that also gives a fair chance to novice teachers. And by participating in this procedure, you also get to read other applications, you learn from other applicants, you gain experience in doing an assessment, and you gain more insight into this whole procedure. Next slide. And I'll go through this quickly, but we will discuss information about the procedure in this presentation, but you can also find more information in the call for proposals, the FAQ that I mentioned. There is, if you happen to read Dutch, there's a Dutch article on Onderwijs, kennis. That's called je eigen onderwijs onder de loep, Onderwijs verbeteren met SoTL. There's a lot of information in that. During the procedure, we will, of course, provide you with clear instructions for the people that apply for the first time, and because this is a new procedure. And this presentation will be recorded and published on the NKO site, so you can use this as a reference during the procedure. And you can, of course, always contact us at pcho@nro.nl. Yeah, then let's move on to the first phase of writing your application, and that is submitting an application. So this whole procedure is in English, so that means that your application and your assessments need to be written in English. The application is also anonymous. I'll go into that into the next slide. And you need to submit the following documents: the application form, an information form, and a budget form. These 3 documents are mandatory. Let's start with the application form, because that's the most important one. In the application form, you describe your research plan. And like I previously mentioned, other applicants are assessors. So it's important that you write your application in an accessible manner, because other applicants may come from a different background, do not understand the jargon that you use, come from a different discipline. So it's important to keep this in mind when writing your application, that others should be able to read, understand, and assess your application. So a tip from us is to have a coworker or someone from a different discipline read your application to see if the content is understandable. If you look at the application form, you will notice that there is a specific format. So the first section starts on the first page and the second section on the second page, etc., etc. It's important to pay attention to this formatting. And more detailed information is in the explanatory notes. Those are the red, that's the red text above each section. So you can click on these, open it, and read more information. And it's important to read that information. And once you submit your application form, to close them or remove them. And it's important to pick the right panel. And the panel is determined by the institution that the main applicant works at. So if you work at a university for applied sciences, you pick applied sciences. Next slides. Yeah, there's a lot of information on this slide, but the main importance about writing an anonymous application is that you do not mention any information on the basis of which you can be identified. And that can be really obvious stuff, such as not mentioning your name, not mentioning where you work, but it can also be more subtle information, like not using references of which you are an author or a co-author. And it can also be even more subtle stuff, such as the language that you use. For example, if you refer to yourself in a certain way or use specific jargon, that could lead other applicants to identify you. So it's really important to keep all this subtle stuff in mind when writing your application. Next slide. Yeah, and besides the application form, there's also an information form where you fill in your personal information, and that form is used by NKO. It's not sent to other applicants. And you fill in a budget form in which you list the budget that you need. Then the site also mentions a declaration of support and a statement of appointment. Those documents are not mandatory for each applicant, but that depends on your contract. You might need them, but you can read on that in chapter 3 of the call for proposals. But the application form, the information form, and the budget form are mandatory, and you need to submit these via Isaac before the 3rd of March. That's the deadline. Then let's look at the assessment aspects. We use assessment aspects, which is different from assessment criteria, and the main difference is that there is no weighting provided. So there's 2 aspects, the project design and the teacher's research-focused attitude. So one aspect focuses on the project. Does it align with SoTL? Does it offer opportunities for improvement? Is it clearly described, and is the plan feasible? That's the one aspect of your application. And the second aspect is, does it have a sufficient impact on your development or the development of the teachers involved? Is it sufficiently explained? Is the applicant receiving appropriate guidance? And both of these aspects are important to keep in mind. You need to consider both of these when writing your application, but also when assessing other applications. Next slide. So once you've submitted these documents, the NKO Bureau will check the admissibility, and we do that between the 3rd of March and the 24th of March. And we will check if your application is indeed anonymous, if all of the documents are complete, if you use the right formatting, if you have written your application in an anonymous way. And if we discover anything, we may contact you within 2 weeks of the submission deadline. And we'll give you 5 working days to make changes. And of course, we will also notify you if your proposal does meet the criteria for submission. At the same time, we will also check for personal interests. So we'll collect all of the names and affiliations of the people who submitted an application. We'll make an overview of that. We send that to all of the applicants. And it's important that you check that document to see if you notice any people in the list that you might have a personal interest or the appearance of a bias with. And the applicants are primarily responsible for dealing with that. So it's important that you indicate with what people you have a personal interest, provide a reasoning for that, and that you give appropriate control measure. And there's 3 options. It could be that you know someone, but that you're able to assess their application well. In that case, it could be that there's no control measure needed. It can also be that you know them too well, or that you have a personal interest in their application. And then the second option could be more appropriate, so that you do not assess that specific application. And in case there's a really severe personal interest, it can also be possible that we put you and the other applicant in the same group, because the people from group A will assess applications from group B. So if by putting you in the same group, that guarantees that you never read their application, and that there's no chance of you ranking other applications lower because of that. Then once you fill that in, you send it back to us, and we will check for the personal interest and if the measures you've provided are appropriate. And again, it's important to note that NKO may contact you with additional questions, so just to get a better image of that. Of course, this is all very sensitive information, so we also sent you a declaration that we ask you to sign, in which you indicate that you comply with the personal interest code. Next slide. Yeah. So once we have a good view of all of the personal interests, we can begin making groups. Like I mentioned, there are two panels, one for applied sciences, one for scientific education. And both of these panels will be split up into two groups, Group A and Group B. These groups will be made based on the personal interests. So the whole goal is having everyone to assess 10 applications from applicants with whom you have no personal interest. Besides looking at the personal interests, the applications are randomly distributed, and the applications from Group A will be assessed by the applicants from Group B in the same panel, and vice versa. Again, we want to stress that it's important to write your application with a general and wide audience in mind, because you never know where your application will end up, and if the people in that will get to read your application have the same background as you do. And then the final point is that the budget will be distributed evenly amongst Group A and B. So let's say if there's 500,000 for the panel of applied sciences, 250 will go to Group A, 250 will go to Group B. So the budget is evenly distributed. And that also means that the assessments that you submit will never influence the outcome of your own application. So there's no point in strategically ranking applications lower to get a better chance yourself. Next slide. Yeah, so how does the writing of peer reviews work? We don't ask you to score them, but we ask you to rank the applications on basis of the assessment aspects in order from 1 to 10. So the application that you think is best based on the assessment aspects you rank as 1, and the worst is 10. And every ranking must be motivated with 15 to 60 words per assessment aspect. So you also write a short motivational text from 30 to 120 per application, in which you motivate why you've ranked an application the way you did. Every application must be allocated a different rank, so it's not possible to rank 2 applications on the second spot or the third spot. So it's every application must receive their own ranking. And you have 13 working days for doing that. Once you've finished, you can send your assessment via email to us. Next slide. Yeah. If all of this is new to you, do not worry. Instructions will be provided, but some general guidelines for writing an assessment are to take the same amount of time and to avoid a double standard. Also really important is to only assess what's provided to you in the document. So do not look up any extra information, or do not click on links, or if specific terms are used that you're not familiar with, do not look them up. It's the responsibility of the applicant to explain them well to you. It's also important to substantiate your assessment. So if you rank an application on the lower side, your motivational text should reflect that ranking. And the same goes as for writing your application. The assessment should also be anonymous. So do not reveal your identity. Do not mention your name. Do not mention your institution. You can, of course, mention your expertise, but in a general way. And note that your motivational text will be communicated to the applicant. So it's important that you write your text professionally and in a way that you would want to receive feedback yourself. Once we've received all of the assessments, the NKO Bureau will check all of the assessments against the set conditions. So we will check if your assessments are anonymous, if you did not include information that is not relevant to the assessment, if you did not exceed the amount of words, that kind of stuff. And only assessments that meet conditions will be taken into account. Again, we will check the assessments and we may contact you for adjustments within 15 days. So let's say if you somewhere mentioned yourself, we ask you to remove that reference. And once all of that is complete, we will make the final prioritization. And we will make 4 final priorities. So there will be a list for group 1 for panel 1 and group B, and 1 for the panel of scientific education, and then again panel A and group A and B, sorry. So we end up with 4 groups, and we do that by collecting all of the rankings and making a final ranking. And then we award the highest ranked applications. So we do that by awarding applications until the budget for that specific group is exhausted. There is no possibility for a rebuttal. So it's important to write your application well and to assess the other applications well. Once we've made the final ranking, we send that to the Program Committee Higher Education, the PCHO. They will check if the procedure was followed correctly, and they will make a final decision. Once all of that is done, the applicants will receive a report with their final ranking and the motivational text that the other applicants wrote. Next slide. Yeah, all of that was a lot of information, but condensing it into a small diagram is you'll start by preparing your application. So that involves your application form, your information form, and your budget form. You submit these before the 3rd of March. Then the NKO Bureau will check the admissibility and check for personal interests. Then between the 2nd of April and the 21st of April, you will be assessing about 10 other applications and writing a short motivational text. Those assessments will be checked by the NKO Bureau, and we will make a final ranking. We will send that to the program committee, and after they agree, the applicants will be informed of the award decision. And the whole round will end somewhere around the end of June. Yeah, so that was a quick overview of the procedure, and I will now give the word back to Femke and Vrijdag for some points to consider when writing an application.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, points to consider when writing the application. We just had a lot of procedural information, and now we're going to the content of the application again. We already had the post-its, of course, which had some what's it called again? Some takeaways. Yeah, takeaway messages on them, which are important when deciding whether you even want to write an application or when you decide to do what to consider. Now we have some additional points for you to consider. The first one being your SoTL project starts when thinking about and writing the application. I think some of the questions were about this as well. So if you look at what the application actually entails, it's the following, I think. You have to write a summary in which you describe the main research objectives, the methodology, the expected results, and the potential relevance of the project. And you also have to explain how your application aligns with the goals of the call and the 5 principles of Felton that were pointed upon. And you have to do this in 2 pages, which seems like you can have the feeling, oh, it's only 2 pages. But I would say, oh my God, it's only 2 pages. How do I do this? Well, because it's only 2 pages and because it's a summary, you really need to think very carefully about what really matters. And I think what really matters is your question about student learning, your evidence, showing your evidence-informed approach, and your methodological choices. And one important thing to realize is that when thinking about these and when you have to include these in your application, that means that you're already involved actually with your SoTL project. The SoTL project doesn't start when funding is awarded. Yeah, then you can start elaborating on what you already did in the proposal, but the reviewers really have to see that you already started and that you already have a clear and concise idea about what you're going to do, what your question is, and why what you're planning on doing is evidence informed, and how you're going to answer your questions, things like that. So the application is already your research design, is part of your research design. So when you write a SoTL application, you're already engaging in a SoTL practice. And maybe if you then don't get awarded, you can still execute it. But know that you already start. The minute you think during this presentation, yeah, this is for me, I'm going to go for this SoTL grant. Then the other one is take your time and get inspired and supported by others. And I think this is just, well, this was already mentioned, of course, by Fowine a couple of times, by me a couple of times. Don't do it by yourself. Make sure that whatever idea you have, don't sit behind your computer thinking about your question, thinking about what theory and literature there's available, thinking about methodological choices, and just typing along. Make sure that all of these central elements of your application are shared with your colleagues, with management, with maybe colleagues from your university or your department, but also outside of your the university. One tip that we have is to join the National SoTL Day. It's the 17th of April, so we realize it's after the deadline, but when you're joining this presentation, I think you have an interest in SoTL, and that you find your own teaching and education for students very important, and you want to do a little more than the reflective teaching or the scholarly approach to teaching, but really be involved in SoTL. So join us on the National SoTL Day on the 17th of April at the Hogeschool Leiden, where people who have the same interests come together, share what they're doing, and discuss all of these important questions.
Yeah, you can already subscribe. The program is online next week. It's going to really cool. So please come and think with others and share your thoughts. And well, it's really nice to meet others who are also interested in doing this kind of research to their own teaching practice. So
yeah, and one big advantage of this sharing is not only that you will improve your application, because I know that for sure, but on the other hand, you will see that there's a big SoTL community here in the Netherlands, in Europe, around the world, and it's really nice to be part of this community. And this could also be a place to share your ideas and brainstorm. And I think the next slide can come up.
Yep. That's for me. Well, keep it small. That's a real important thing, because it's not, it sounds like a big amount of money, 30,000 or 35,000. But when you realize how much time that is, when you have to keep your own time in mind and what it costs, then, well, it's about 6 to 8 European credits. So if you think about what would you like your students to do in that time, how big is the project your students are performing in that time, so that's something you have to keep in mind. So keep it small, make it really concrete. What kind of courses are you focusing on? What kind of intervention? What type of students? So really don't make it too big, because it's not, yeah, you can do that, but then you have to put some of your own time in it, which is okay, it's okay, but still be really aware of that. Well, involve stakeholders, Femke already mentioned it, I did too. Involve your manager, maybe if you have one in your team, that's really important, because if you want to change things, it's really important that people are also willing to do that. And it's also really important that it's not only your own question, which you want to know more about, but it's also the question of your team, for example. So that's really important. Don't do it alone. Find critical friends. That's something. Sometimes you, especially when with this cool peer review procedure, which I think is really interesting. I'm really curious about how it works out. It's something you can also do in your own teaching practice, actually. So that's a really nice experience for yourself. But find critical friends. So let them read your application or think with you, and also think other things than you do. So that's your critical friends. Really important to have that too.
Yeah, and I'm going to make it a little bit more complex, because next to having to address these central concepts and keeping it small, it also has to be a clear and well-reasoned plan. One that, when read by reviewers, it shows the interdependence of your teaching context, what you're going to do or change in that context, or the intervention, what you expect this intervention to set into motion when it comes to students' learning processes, that is based on theory and prior research, and not only your gut feeling. These are what we call the mechanisms. And finally, what you expect through the interventions and the mechanisms will be improved or better understood about student learning. And this is what we call the outcomes. So for instance, in a first year course where students struggle with applying a certain theory, can be any kind of course. This is the context. Well, we're going to introduce something, a teaching intervention. We're going to say, okay, we're going to be introducing case-based tutorials. This is the intervention. And we're going to do this because we think by introducing these case-based tutorials, students will be more cognitively engaged and their self-regulation skills will be improved. And because this will happen when we introduce case-based tutorials, we think that the students will have a deeper conceptual understanding and better transfer to practice. And these are the outcomes. So this is something that is called, and that's the figure below, the SEMO logic. In a specific educational context, you implement a certain intervention that will put certain learning processes or mechanisms into motion. Therefore, we achieve certain learning outcomes. And it's not that you have to include the C and the I and the M and the O specifically in your proposal. It's just a tool to help you make this concise plan, this coherent plan. So when you start writing your plan, make sure that you have this type of story to tell, to your colleagues. It's also a way to tell your stories to others, so you can brainstorm about it. So what is our intervention, and why do we think that with this intervention we're gonna get our outcomes? And this is that in between what you're going to be doing and the outcomes that you want to achieve, what's in between that's theory and literature for most part. Because there you're going to say, okay, I'm going to do this, and because of that, I think this will happen, and therefore we'll get the outcomes. So it's a nice way, or a handy way, to see whether you're, on the one hand, to see whether your plan, your application is coherent, but it's also a way to review, of course, the other applications. Does this person have a coherent plan in which it's clear why a specific intervention leads to specific outcomes? And then if you don't, then that's not the whole story when it comes to a clear and well-reasoned plan, because then following from this context analysis, as we call it, follows a researchable teaching question, a question you want to answer, because we're doing an inquiry, we're doing a study. And this question has to, of course, follow logically from this analysis. And then you have to think of data you're going to collect that's going to answer your question. So in case of this students who are struggling with applying theory and for which we then decide to introduce case-based tutorials, it would be very relevant to see whether to look for student work, to collect student work that shows applying the concepts, or short reflections on how students use the theory in these case-based tutorials. Yeah, that could give me a good idea of what is happening there. It would be very not that relevant to ask for student satisfaction or attendance or general course evaluations. Your data that you want going to collect really have to provide an answer or give an answer to your question. Yeah, I think that's when it comes to the clear and well-reasoned plan. So we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and this already said. So I think we can continue because, well, it takes time. You have to think it over. And there's one question. Can you give an indication about how much time do they have to invest? I think that's really difficult to say because it depends on the experiences they already have with writing such an application, what's already done about doing some small literature research. You already have done that. When you have done all that steps, then it makes it easier to write an application. But if you
and of course, a lot of university, but also hogescholen all have a center for academic teaching.
That's
and
a good one.
Educational consultants who can help. So we already mentioned a couple of stakeholders or people you can get in contact with to make sure that to help you write the application. But these people, these educational consultants, these people who work at the Center for Academic Teaching, they can help as well.
They can also help you with finding some literature or providing some literature, because a lot of times they have some of it just available for you. So that's really smart to involve them in this process. So,
So we shared a lot of information. So we want to give you a quick tour of the most important things and the highlights. So again, we want to stress that it's important that you write your application and your assessments in English. The deadline for applying is the 3rd of March. And we need you to provide 3 documents: an application form, an information form, and a budget form. And the application form and information form need to be saved as PDFs. We want to again stress that it's important to pay attention to the explanatory notes. So if you open them, there's a lot more information in them. And it's also important to use the right formatting, so to close or remove the explanatory notes and to stick to the amount of pages for each section. It's very important that your application is anonymous, so do not refer to yourself or your institution or your co-applicants or your experience or research. So keep that in mind. And it's important that you write for a general audience, because you never know who gets to read your application. So write it in a way that a general audience would understand it and would be able to assess it. For the conditions for applicants, we advise you to check the call for proposals, and if you have any other questions, to contact us so that we can help you. And we ask you to meet the deadlines to remain included in the procedure. And those are the deadlines that we shared. But after each deadline, there's a brief period in which we can contact you for making adjustments or asking additional information. So it's also important to meet these deadlines. And I think that concludes our presentation, and that we can then move on to the questions.
Sorry, I forgot to add the link to the FAQ, as you can see, but we can put it in the chat as well, I think.
Someone who raised their hands.
FAQ. Yeah. You can speak.
Okay, thank you. So I had, I think, 3 questions. First, about the application to be like being anonymous, because it's focused on a course, and we have to maybe give some like insight about the course itself, and it's really hard to make that because the context also matters there. So how should we handle that?
Well, you can of course give information about your course and about your experience, but we ask you to phrase it in a general way. So I think on the slides on which I discussed the anonymity, there was an example that stated that you cannot refer to a specific project you did, but you can refer to that you have experience in X, Y, and Z. Yeah, so the second to last bullet point. So you can describe your project in general terms, but you cannot address it directly.
Okay, but if there is an issue there, then we'll get a chance to fix it.
Yes. Yeah. So if you happen to name yourself or your institution, and if we notice it, then we give you a chance to fix it. Exactly. Yeah.
Good. My second question is that there was a point that your SoTL project starts with writing the proposal. Was it just that just writing the proposal is also part of it, or it means that it shouldn't be a work that's ongoing and we want to extend it or add something to the previous work?
I think it means that when you write your application, you should keep or you should have a general overview of what you want to do and how you're going to do the project. But once you've been awarded, then you receive more information from NKO for expanding on that. So it's more to get a general gist of what you want to do.
Okay, and last question, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, because it feels like it's more focused on intervention, and I'm afraid that like also like in the evaluation rubric, maybe it will be also based on intervention, but some of the projects can be just investigating a problem and not really suggesting an intervention. How will they be assessed?
It's up to the peer, your peers. Basically, everyone who is going to apply will be judging solely on these criteria that have been provided. And it's also a matter of convincing people that it is relevant what you're doing. But those things, the actual content of the assessment is outside of our control. So it's about making things very clear, including the relevance.
Okay. But is the rubric already included in the call?
Yes,
Okay,
4.3.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
See, there's someone else who has a question?
There's still some questions also in the chat.
The chat, yeah.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I put my question in the chat, but I'm curious about what is an allowed expense in the budget. I know that it's, if I remember, student assistance and also part of our salary, but it was unclear to me if something like a workshop would be within the parameters. So that's one question, is what is allowed? And then my second question is, in terms of sharing the findings, I feel like in my case, what that looks like will really depend on what the findings are. You know, whether it becomes a lesson plan or a game, well, probably not a game, but like exactly what would come out of it will depend. So is it, how detailed do we need to be, or can it just be something like sharing of findings, X amount, and then that can be determined later, or does it kind of need to be predetermined? So yeah, two questions there. Thank you.
I think in response to your second question, that in this stage of writing your application, it can be worded in a generic way. So it's not possible to go really in depth into what you want to do. It's just that you need to have an idea of how you want to do your project and what effects you want to have. Your first question was on what was possible within the budget, right?
Yes, like what kind of things can we include in the budget?
Ooh, then I'll need to check the call for proposals really quickly.
You do, I
If you
can
have,
say something additional to the sharing part. I think what is good to think is whether you, in what way you want others to get to know about what you've done. Yeah, so if you're going to be making a lesson plan, then how are you going to make sure that others know about this? And not only your direct colleagues, but for instance, the educational institution that you work for, or writing an article about it so that the scope is even, or the reach is even broader.
can also add about the budget, I think, because we have personal cost and material cost. So you can also add like workshops and costs for that under the material costs. But if you have very specific questions, if something is allowed, you can also email us, and then we'll send it to our some colleague of ours who will check the budget, so we can double check that as well. So if it's very specific, you can email, I think, the question. I think that would be best. But yeah, there's also more details in the call for proposals. So I think that's about the budget.
I see there's two more questions.
I think Miranda is first. Or did she move away? Can you hear me?
No, yeah, I have problems unmuting my mic. So sorry. So I have a question. So the second element that we are judged as a proposal upon, right? So that is does the project have sufficient impact on the professional development of the teacher involved, and is this sufficiently explained? But we should not say anything about ourselves personally. So how do I convey in a project that it is important for me, not telling anything about my background? How does that work? So do I say that I want to make a promotion or not? How do you argue something like that?
Yeah, in a generic way. So you can, of course, tell something about your background, but in a way that other applicants, when seeing your name in the list, wouldn't be able to identify you based on that information. So you can, of course, say that you're what study you're doing, or in what branch you're working, but it shouldn't be obvious and identifiable.
Okay, but for example, if I would argue that I am in a teaching track and doing research about education is very important for my position, that would fit in that one.
That's allowed. Yeah.
And then it says, is the applicant receiving appropriate guidance and support during the project? If I have picked a project that I can do fine on my own, is that then a problem? Because then I actually don't need support. So, but for example, if I have a project for which something has to be developed, and that is where I need support for. So, for example, I need something developed for Canvas. and then I make sure that I have a development group for that, would that already be able to argue that, or are you just thinking everybody will have the same issues, you can just fight it out among themselves how you grade this? Or
Well, the main aspects, so like the main criteria, but the aspects, so there's no weighting. Those are the most important ones, and the ones listed under that, the sub criteria, are guiding questions. So it's not strictly necessary to do everything that's in the sub criteria, but they're guiding questions. So support or guidance is an important part of SoTL, but if you're not planning to have that support or do the project by yourself, that's of course also allowed, but it's also up to the other assessors to decide on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would like to, well, we may want to try and apply for it, for the grant and with a team, but we are the teachers and we will be teaching the course, but we need someone to do the research and the analysis and the observations, and also the students that will observe some of the teaching. Can we hire someone to do the observations and the analysis, and who will then report back to the teaching team so that we are informed of the successes or not successes of the intervention?
In terms of the budget, it is allowed. You are allowed to hire external parties. That's under the material costs.
Yeah.
However, it is up to the other applicants to judge whether this is fitting for a SoTL project and the quality of it. So just know that it is possible and allowed in theory.
And there's no percentage, like, because this would be the big part of the big chunk of the budget.
It's a good question, and there is no percentage in the call, so you could theoretically put up
100%.
almost all of it to material.
Of course, not 100, but okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
I think there's a material cost limit. It should be a certain percentage of the budget.
But it isn't in the call, which might be a mistake on our end. So do with it what you will.
But I think
double check
You're
the
sure
call
it's not in the
for-
call?
Yeah, check the call because the call is leading in this as well.
Okay.
Can I add to that one, like something? So in talking about SoTL, it is the case that the teacher is quite important. So on the one hand, the teacher has a role in optimizing their teaching using SoTL, which is evidence-informed and systematic. That's one, we say the knife cuts two ways or something. I don't know how to translate it in English, but on the other hand, it professionalizes the teacher because the teacher is involved in systematically researching their education, reading the theory and the literature. And I wonder whether it's your question, whether you can outsource all of that to a student assistant.
Well, we have an idea that we want to try out as a team.
Yeah.
So we have already the broad idea of what the intervention would be, but for the to implement it, we don't have the time.
Yeah.
And for that, we need someone to do the, let's say, research part, and then report back to us so that we know what our thought of intervention achieved.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to SoTL, that should always be in collaboration with the teacher. So I think if you look at the it could very well be that the reviewers will say this is not for it to be a SoTL project. That he has to be more collaboration between teachers on the one hand and the student's assistant on the other.
Okay.
This is just
this would be a research assistant. So
yeah.
So I would
And it's
argue
more
that
about
as well.
data collection than I think what you want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
Like
about
if you
the
want to do
data collection. You have to.
recordings
Yeah. Okay. So,
Yeah.
or observations or
Yeah, so
data
it-
analysis.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
at
so
university, this is often done. So you have a project leader, which is a teacher or a group of
Yeah.
teachers, and then there's a student's assistant who assists with things like implementation, data collection, analysis. But the teachers always stay responsible, and they're always involved with the student assistant in the specific steps. It's actually never the case that they say, okay, now we're handing it over to the student assistant, and please report back at us what the results are.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the second aspect of the teacher's research-focused attitude is really important, and applications will be assessed by that aspect. So
Which
if
aspect
you
is that?
the teacher's research-focused attitude, the second assessment aspect.
Which is the second?
Oh,
I don't remember.
almost. Yeah. For the second one, yeah. So
Okay.
if you choose to go that way, you should word clearly how the teacher is involved.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll look at that. Thanks.
there's also still a question in the chat. I saw that someone would really want to know how much time it costs to write down an application. I find it very hard to give an
It's a
indication in
difficult
hours.
question because
Yeah.
the application form in itself isn't that long. It's like
No.
5-6 pages. There's of course the information form and the budget form that you need to fill in as well. But I think the time investment has more to do with thinking of a good project and thinking of the consequences and the way you're planning to do your project. So it's really difficult to give you an exact number on that.
Yeah. That's what I think too.
There's a question from someone has raised their hand. Oh, no, not anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Marina, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I wanted to ask the question before, but you gave already a global answer. Could you still provide a rough estimate of the time required for a proposal, given that the problem statement is already well defined, potential peer reviews are maybe been identified, and we have access to expertise from a colleague, but that's another Comenius grant, so it's not really comparable, I think, but because the deadline is already there, it's in a few weeks, so I can, you could help me by giving me a rough estimate of the time investment.
No,
It will be
everyone
really,
has,
really it will be really rough then, so maybe it's not really helpful, but I don't know.
It's basically like if you give students the assignment of writing an essay with you have some framework. It has to be like 2 pages or whatever. Some people will spend half an hour on it. Other people will spend 2 days fully on it. So even if they have the same level of preparation, it's up to you or up to the person who is applying.
But of course, the more clear your problem and your question and your theoretical framework is, the less time you have to spend at writing the application. So then it will only be if that's all clear, then it will only be writing the application. And I don't know how fast you write, but that's then what you have to do. But if you still have to think about what is exactly your problem and what do you really want to do, or is there already a problem to be solved? This was also one of the questions. So are there solutions to my problem? And you still first have to find that out before you can write down the main focus of your study. Then it will take way longer. So it really depends on where you are in this when it comes to your ideas around the application you want to write.
Okay, Okay, thank you. I will discuss that with my colleagues. Thank you.
Good idea.
I see another question in the chat. I don't know if this is answered already, but how much time is involved in the assessment process? Well, the assessment process of applying for this grant round and our answer would be a couple of months. Just the assessment process of having to assess other applications is 13 days, 13 working days.
Then that final question that you asked again, whether we could answer, I was just looking at it. I think we cannot answer that question right now, and we will ask someone at our organization who might be able to answer it. If you could send us pcho@nro.nl that question, then we will come back to you personally with the answer. You can find the email address on the page of the. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Nadine. Because yeah, it's a more complicated question.
I think this concludes the question.
For all I know, all questions have been answered, apart from the one that we will come back to. We'll put it on the FAQ because it might also be relevant for other people. What if you combine teaching tasks with other tasks? Does a teaching appointment have to be at least 0.5 FTE or just a general appointment? Might also be applicable for other people. We'll also look into that and upload it to the FAQ page.
Maybe to add to that, is this 0.5? We will apply as a team. Some of the team have more or less FTE. Some might have 0.2 and others might have 0.5. Is that a problem, or does it have to be in total 0.5?
Well, the thing is, only one person will be the main applicant.
Okay, and it's about that one.
And maximum one person can be a co-applicant. And does it count for both people or just the main applicant?
I believe so, but I'll need to check that a bit more in depth. But I believe it goes for the main and co-applicant. Yeah.
For both. Okay, clear.
Then
for partaking in this information session. Oh, that's literally what. Okay. Well, we're hoping that you found it informative, and thanks for also partaking in the chat and asking all your questions, which is very good because everyone is learning from the answers. Hopefully, a lot of you will be applying. We're excited about it. I hope that you're excited about your projects as well.
And come to Leiden.
And also thank you, Florina and Femke, for attending this information session with the expertise you have. It was very useful. Everyone, I think.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. I also hope that a lot of people who will apply for a SoTL grant.
We're excited. And yeah, we'll put the recording on the website. So if you want to rewatch it, or we'll also put the PowerPoint there. So if you want to look at certain slides, then please look on our website for more information.